G'day folks and welcome to Australian UFO Sightings official podcast. I'm your host Anthony Goodall and you're listening to Encounters Down Under. Here we invite guests on the show to tell us about their encounters with aliens and UFOs, where most of our episodes were streamed live from our Facebook page, which gave listeners the opportunity to ask questions to our guests regarding their encounter. If you have had an encounter and would like to be a guest on the show, please get in touch with us. You can send us a message through our Facebook page, Encounters Down Under, or send us an email at australianUFOsightings@outlook.com.au. Be sure to join us on Facebook and share with your friends and family to help us grow, and hopefully encourage others to come forward with their encounter. If you're an iTunes listener and a fan of the show, why not give us that 5-star rating and review, and you could have your review featured on the podcast. But enough of that, let's get into what you've been waiting for. So kick back, relax with your favourite beverage, and enjoy the show. G'day folks and welcome to another episode of Encounters Down Under. Alana joins us on this episode, who has had an absolute ripper of an experience where she was up close and personal with a strange craft that travelled up her backyard, forcing her to hide. So please welcome to the show, Alana. G'day Alana and welcome to the show.
Hi Anthony, thank you.
Oh, it's great having you on. Thank you very much for getting in touch and wanting to talk to your experience to us. It's got me a bit mind-blowing about your experience there, where you've come in a really close encounter with this craft. And you also had a bit of an experience there early in your life there, but I'm going to let you take over and basically explain your experiences.
Okay. Well, I suppose my earliest experience goes back to when I was a child, although it wasn't necessarily as much my experience. I didn't end up seeing anything, but I grew up with my grandparents from the age of 3. When I was 5, we moved to Yamba, it was a very small sort of seaside town at the time. My grandfather was a builder there and, moved the little family there. And one night, my grandmother went out to empty the teapot and there was a little bit of commotion and called my grandfather out and my sisters and, they went running out and were looking at the sky. I sort of followed but had no idea what they were talking about or what they were really looking at. And I suppose I didn't really see what they were looking at, but it turned out that they'd seen whether it was, over the years, I've wondered whether it was one craft or whether it was a small craft flying in formation, which were all different coloured lights in an arrow shape. And my grandmother was adamant over the years that it was all separate craft, all different colours, reds, greens, that type of thing in quite a big formation. And anyway, she rang the local radio station at the time and let them know what she saw and was quite excited about it all. And my grandfather went to work the next day and his workmates were having a bit of a giggle and asked them what his wife had been drinking the night before. And so, it was sort of one of those situations, I suppose, where I grew up thinking that if you saw something like that, you really don't, it's something to be mocked. So, but, discussing it with my grandparents, who were very down-to-earth people, over the years, they were absolutely adamant about what they saw and fascinated by what they saw, as were my sisters. Basically, at the time, my auntie and uncle were also living in Yamba, and my auntie had relatives in America, and she'd obviously spoken to them, and they sent a newspaper clipping over to her, over to my grandmother, which was exactly the same, a photograph of exactly the same formation as they'd seen in little old Yamba. So yeah, that was quite interesting. And so, as I said, I didn't see it. I grew up with I guess, a foundation of, you know, what could possibly be out there, but didn't really, you know, stake anything too much on it, for want of a, you know, better phrase. And basically went about living my life, and until I had my own experience, which was when I was 21. And by then I'd moved to Colo Heights, which is in between Singleton and Windsor, and on the what's known as it's Singleton Road, also known as the Putty Road. And it's quite a rugged sort of an area. And yeah, so I, yeah, basically was, yeah, sorry, just had, yeah. So yeah, anyway, this backed onto what's known, my property backed onto what's known as the Yengo National Park, which I believe is something like 400,000 acres of national park, and it's on the other side of that national park is Gosford. And so obviously we had very black skies. We used to have a lot of astronomers come up to the area because, you know, everything could be seen very well with no lights from the city, that type of thing. And my baby at the time was probably about 5 weeks old, 5.5, 6 weeks old. And I used to wash my nappies in the old twin tub washing machine, which was off the back veranda. So it was a double brick raised house. And that you have to go out the back door and into the laundry, which was sort of a separate type area. So my husband would nurse the baby while I'd go out and do that overnight. And this particular night I was out there, and, you know, not much to do while you're rinsing nappies in a twin tub other than to stare out the window. I had the light on in the laundry, obviously, which, you know, wasn't really looking much out the window because everything was illuminated by the light from where I was, but, you know, you could look out at a bit of a black sky. And as I was doing that, I noticed a massive white light in the sky, which was to my left. And at first it was, yeah, I sort of thought, oh, the neighbours must be setting up for some sort of party. We had, I had a neighbour on my left side of the property, which you couldn't see their house from our house, but you could see over the back of their property. And this light was enormous. At first I thought it was up on a huge pole, and that they must be setting up for some sort of shindig down the back of their property. And then I started to think, well, that must be a long way down, and that pole must be very high, and how does that work? And yeah, it was, I suppose I looked at it back and forth for all that time pondering, which I suppose was about 20 seconds, seemed like a long time. And then it slowly started to move. And then I was like, okay, what is this? And it moved slightly away, but it's almost like it just moved very, very slightly, almost as though it was realizing what I was seeing. It was quite strange. And as I started to realize, it started to move a little bit more. And then it started to move at like a slow pace. So that's when I thought, okay, what's this? And I basically ran out, switched the light off in the laundry so I could see out there better. And the thing started to shoot across the sky. The sky there was huge because it was all just national park. So the light moved away from me at a fairly slowish pace, and then it shot across the sky and around like nothing I have ever seen. I'm very familiar with RAAF craft since the Richmond Air Base was only, half an hour away from where we lived. And, they'd have planes fly over every so often, but this was the speed of this white light across the sky was incredible. And I ran out, switched the light off in the laundry, and a few steps was to the back screen door where my husband was sitting on the lounge with his back to the door, nursing our new baby and trying to get him to sleep. And I summoned to him to quickly come out, and I still see his face just turning around and frowning at me and gesturing me to just shush. And at that point, I was like, well, I can't miss this thing. So I'd seen it. I could still by then turn and see it still shooting around because of the broad sky. And then it seemed to curve there as it got to the right of my property. There was a whole big tree line. And I thought, oh, I've lost it behind the trees. But just prior to that tree line, I saw it curve back in my direction, and then I lost it. By then, I'd run down the steps and was standing on the backyard, which my backyard at the time was probably 20 acres of cleared area before it hit the tree line onto the Crown land, and then behind that was National Park. So it was basically cleared and then trees. And I just thought, oh, okay, I've lost it. I stood there for a minute to hope that I could see it again. And then as I turned to walk back up to the house and ponder what this white light would have been, this massive craft started to just cruise up my yard. So, wow, I don't even, I start to shake when I get to this bit. It was going at like a walking pace. So it was big. It was like probably about, I could see the front of it because I was standing directly in front of it. And at that point, I was just, okay, I'm standing straight where this thing is coming towards me. I don't even know what my thoughts were at that time other than, oh my God. And I knew I had to get out of the way. So I sort of shuffled to my left as it continued to cruise towards me. I was showing dogs at the time, and I had 4 dog yards, big dog runs with big dog kennels with big open doors, and my dogs didn't even come out. This thing was just completely silent. You couldn't hear it. It appeared to be black against a black sky, but the sky behind it was lighter than this craft. And it looked ultra modern. Even by today's standards, I would say it was incredible. It had, as it was coming up, it had like a windscreen. Which had a dim yellow light. It had either a very tall I call it a person. I don't know what it was. But for want of a better word, the pilot of this thing was either really tall and sitting down driving it, or it was standing up. But it had the shape. I couldn't see features, but I could make out this black outline, and I think there was something else or another person in there with it, but that only seemed to last for seconds before that light went out. And I could make out some type of, as it got closer, before I basically did a zoom to my left, I could make out some type of marking on it, which was like, wasn't our writing. It was like triangles and dashes and that sort of thing, like almost like a registration plate, but stuck on the side of it. I don't even know. I felt all the blood drain from my head to my feet, and then it was. I had basically gone to the one tree next to my brick barbecue that I had in the yard, which was directly behind my back veranda, and I stood there and watched it cruise up to the back of my house. I had a shed that was probably about 10 metres long, which had a smallish like driveway between that and the house, and it cruised up basically and hovered there. So I could have thrown a rock at it. It was I was determined that, well, lots of thoughts were running through my mind. One of them was, I really hope my husband doesn't come out here now. It was almost as though it was hovering there looking in the back door, and I have no idea whether it knew I was there. My feelings at the time were almost as though just awkward and embarrassed, and I really can't. I can't say it was fear. It was probably shock. I don't know. But it hovered there, and even with all of that and not knowing whether it was our craft or what it was doing there, I was determined to absorb every single thing that I could see of it. And the only real light that, was basically my back door light through the screen door, and then this craft. So it was still slightly dark, but the only these dim green lights, which were I still don't know whether they were a whole ring of lights coming on and off in succession, or whether it was one light spinning right round, but they were all round lights, and they were circulating around the craft. I would say it was probably about, by I couldn't make out any wings on it. I don't know whether that was because, whether it was because of the angle I was slightly looking up at it. But when the lights went around, they weren't interrupted by anything that I could see as wings. And I hadn't seen wings on it as it came up the yard. It just looked like it was almost like probably a big truck type, probably a bigger front than a truck, but the lights went around, and as they were on the other side of the craft, I would try to make out how far the underbelly of it was. which was a fair way down and it was flat. And the lights would circulate around. I could make out certain details of it. The green lights inside didn't illuminate the area outside of it, including me, who was not far away from it. It didn't light up the ground. It's almost like it had a windowsill underneath these lights. But yeah, they just kept circulating around. Obviously, the white light that I'd seen wasn't on. It wasn't on when it came up the yard, and the green lights only came on when it hovered there, and it didn't make a sound. It was a really, really quiet, late November, early December night, and really clear. No breeze, just a really pleasant sort of early evening. And this thing didn't even rustle the leaves. It probably about a quarter of an acre from it, over to my other fence line, which was parallel to it, was crown land. So that was really thick, dried out for that season, gum leaves, really, really thick bush that you couldn't walk in there at all, really, because it was scrub and it was bush and never been touched or really burnt for years and that type of thing. And it didn't illuminate that. None of those lights illuminated anything around it. It's like they were just internal. Yeah, and so I stood there watching it, just again, too scared at that point to move. Wasn't sure whether someone was going to come out of it. It gave me the impression that if anyone was to come out of it, I don't know where they'd get out of it, because I didn't know where the door was or anything like that. But I didn't know whether someone was going to pop out and say they were from the Air Force, or whether they were aliens, or whether they were just going to walk over to me with suits on. I had no idea. But, it's amazing how many thoughts can run through your head in what seemed like a long time, but it was probably quite a short amount of time. Again, by then it was fear about whether my husband was just going to come to the back door and see where I was and nursing our baby. And then in that moment, the big white light came back on. It did seem to lift in sound, but it was still just a hum. And the light did illuminate part of the shed in front of it. And the rear of the craft went up. It appeared to move over to its left, over towards the Crown land. And then the part that I'll never understand is that it appeared to just go into the ground. It went up and sideways, tilting forward with its light on, and then went straight down. And that I couldn't get my head around. It's like it can't land in that bush. How does it go? How did that happen? It can't go through the trees. But whether or not the light just went out and I couldn't see it anymore, but it was still facing downways when the light went out, I'll never know. So yeah.
That is absolutely amazing. Like,
yeah,
it's not very excuse me. It's not very often you hear of people getting this close to a craft.
Yeah.
The fact that you're this close where you can actually literally throw a rock at it and you hit it. That's mind blowing. It's like, what was going through your head when you realized this thing was actually approaching your backyard?
Well, initially I stood there just stunned at what I was seeing. It was at walking pace. It had not a care in the world. It must have known. It must have, in my opinion, it saw, we're talking thousands of hectares of nothing, and where it was, whether it saw this figure in a window, I was the only house around with a light on, and it came to have a look, but it appeared intentional. It appeared from where it was, which I now know what I thought was a big stadium light in my neighbour's paddock must have been hundreds of kilometres away. It's just that its appearance was close because it was so big, because it wasn't until it went to move that I realised the distance that it actually was. And then it shot further back and then started to curve back around. But again, my thoughts were that I'd lost it, and wow, I would have been pondering what type of craft could fly that like that. And I mean in seconds, and just gliding and curving around like that. But my thoughts were, it's coming up the yard. I better get out of the way. Absorbing as much about the thing as I could, also, I guess, just absolutely stunned at what I was seeing, and also what it was going to do, and whether my dogs were going to come out and they, what the whole thing was about. So that's where obviously I got a good look at, by then it was only a quarter of an acre away and coming towards me at walking, but very, very slowly, and not a sound. And so I was awkward. I was like, well, what do I do? So there was a certain amount of fear, because I was not going to run up the stairs, or I had to I went to my left to where this one tree was. I didn't even squat down. I felt so, I guess, like a fox in the headlights. And I guess I'm safe at this point, and even while it was hovering there, I wasn't game to move in case it hadn't seen me. And I was worried that my husband was going to turn up at the door while absorbing everything that I was looking at.
Yeah, because what was the actual shape of this craft like? Was it disc shape, or was it sort of like
I
a
wouldn't
big building,
say,
or?
no, I can't say, it wasn't, it was more like an oval. It had a curved windscreen, and the windscreen went right around the front of the craft, like curved glass. And it had like a grill type. It looked like again, it was very modern looking, and it appeared to be black. I don't know whether it was metallic and reflecting the dark around it, but it was darker than what was around it. So it was a dark night, but it wasn't really, really dark where it blended in. It looked darker against its background.
Yeah.
And it was, I would say it was about 10 meters long, and maybe certainly wasn't that wide at the front. It was it may have been close to that. It looks like it had a wide front, but it didn't look as wide when I saw it coming up the yard as what it did long. But it wasn't huge either, if that makes sense. It was, it certainly wasn't the size of my house. It wasn't, it could have been around roughly the size of the shed, which was, what it was behind. But it was rounded. It was, had no sharp sort of corners or anything like that.
Okay, so spherical. So, well, maybe like a tic tac kind of shape, or?
More like an oval type shape. The lights that went round it went round in like an oval shape. They didn't go because, I was watching the lights go round, and as they came on my side, they almost like they disappeared quickly. And you'd sort of, calculate when they were coming around again. So when they'd come around again towards the front, I was, quickly trying to make out the underbelly through its own illumination type thing, even though it wasn't illuminating very much. And the underbelly was much lower than where the windscreen was. And by then I couldn't, because the lights were all off in it, I couldn't make out the windscreen anymore. All I could see of any light was the green lights going around it.
I'm not sure if you've seen the movie Flight of the Navigator.
No.
Ah, that's unfortunate. That's sort of like a. It looks like it's like an oval shaped sort of pod looking craft. It's a bit unique in its own little shape there.
Yeah.
That's probably like maybe the closest I can think. After this show, I'll send you the message of the shape of it and see if that gets a bit of a resemblance to it.
Yeah.
But it's not the first time I've heard someone come across this sort of craft of being
Yeah.
oval shaped and
Yeah.
such. And it sort of
Yeah.
surprised me too that they didn't see you as they were approaching up the backyard.
Well, it's almost as though, well, I think they did. I think I was probably, without sounding like I'm flattering myself, I think they came over to have a look. That the impression I got, and I've said to people and thought later, they had no problem just cruising up my backyard as though they owned it. It was just so, it's almost like I felt as though they acted as though they owned the place. There was no shyness. They weren't trying to hide. It's just really quite incredible.
No, it is. It is. Have you sort of wondered what they were trying to observe, or maybe what they were trying to achieve by gliding up to your back door?
Oh yeah, I've wondered lots of things, but it was almost like they were having a sticky beak, and whether they knew by then that because I always thought, thank goodness I turned off the laundry light, because if I hadn't have turned off the laundry light, all of that little area in front of there would have been illuminated and I would have just stood out. But because I'd switched that off and I was down on the backyard almost right in front of it, I may not have been obvious to them, and that gave me time to kind of go, wow, and get it's like, where do I go? I didn't want to run up the back stairs into the back door because then I would have been seen. But also the backyard really only had this one big gum tree and a brick barbecue. But by the time I got to that tree and the barbecue and was standing there, I wasn't even game to squat down because it was right there. I thought, well, I'm alive till this point and I'm still standing here, so I'll just stay here. Like, it's not like I couldn't move. I could have. I had all my wits about me. I had every sense. I didn't, I was just determined to observe every single thing, no matter what happened. It was, even though I felt like all of my blood in my body was in my feet, just keeping me in that one spot. But also the mother's instinct of, my baby inside. And to me, it was almost like they parked there staring in the back door, and yet my husband didn't see or hear them, but neither did my dogs. They cruised up not over the dog yards, but in front of the dog yards in this massive craft. And yet I've got 6 border collies in kennels with open fronts that didn't come out and bark at them. or didn't wonder, didn't even come out in the yards. It was just because it was, I guess, so dark. The craft was so dark against a darkish sky that it really couldn't. It's always made me think people are inside watching their TVs. They wouldn't know these things were behind their house or above their house. And even when the lights came on, obviously my husband was sitting with his back to the door. My house was a big open plan room. Basically, it was a double brick house with a back door and a front door, very, very plain. But you could see, if you looked through the front door, you could see out the back door, and it was just one great big room, including the kitchen, big, just open plan room. And it was like they parked there and they must have been just looking in the back door. Whether they saw me or not, I don't know. I was expecting, what are they going to do? Are they going to come out? Are they going to? By then I was probably standing there, almost. Again, the emotions are a bit hard to describe because it's nothing that I can get my head around, but I know what I'm seeing. And I remember thinking, I'll never not believe again, in these, what is it? But at the same time, wanting to research what the RAAF have, that doesn't make a sound, that just cruises into people's backyards and has these dim green lights and that sort of thing. And when it basically moved and what appeared to go down in the ground or disappear into the trees, it's almost like it disappeared before my eyes going downwards, like it vanished. And it like I said, it did rev a little bit, like the whizzing as the light went on, the big white light, which is obviously the light that I'd seen in the distance, but didn't appear. It was like it was on very low beam. It was nothing like the light it had when it was over in the sky. It was like it was on lowish beam. The revs kind of went up, or the humming raised. The back end of it went up as it moved, and all in like the one motion, moved sideways and upways and then downways, what appeared to be into the crown land next door, which again couldn't make sense of because it was all trees. So at that point, I basically ran up the stairs through the house. My husband was still sitting on the lounge watching telly with the baby, and I was just in shock. I was just shaking his head wide-eyed and said, wow, you just never. And he's like, oh, what? And I said, oh, never mind. I ran straight through the front door, straight across to my neighbour's paddock across the road, because I knew she was out there waiting for her horse to foal. Went across there and I just said, did you see that? And she just said, see what? And I said, oh my gosh, I'm the only one that's just seen this thing. And I considered, do I go over and look into the crowned land? But my head was also saying, no, it couldn't land in there. So, I'm sort of probably still in shock and trying not to make this like I'm some sort of nutcase to my neighbour. Discussed the horse and foaling and had to go home and then get my head around it all. So, yeah.
What was your husband's reaction after telling him the story?
Probably a bit odd, a little bit like, oh, okay. I just said, when I ask you to come and look, can you please come and look? But on the other hand, I'm glad he didn't, because then there would have been us. Even when he gestured to me to shush, I just said, put him on the ground. Just put him on the ground and come out here. And he obviously didn't. But yeah, it became this. I described it. he didn't really react that much at all, I don't suppose. It was like, I don't know, little bit sort of blasé about it. Whether he thought, I don't know what he thought. I'm just saying I've just seen the most incredible thing, had the most incredible experience, and it was almost like it was just shrugged off. I thought, oh well, okay. That that's how it goes.
Yeah, no, look, I suppose it is a very bizarre situation, and the
Yeah,
thing that's got me really confused is like definitely like the dogs not reacting to it. Like usually they're pretty sensitive when it comes to
yeah,
low frequency vibrations or something like something
yeah,
strange going on in the area, and
yeah.
the fact that the dogs aren't even doing anything, it sort of makes
No,
you wonder.
it,
Like,
it's just as though it was just so quiet. Um, it wasn't late in the night. It was not like they were hysterical type dogs, but I would have expected, even when it was parked behind the house, that I would have heard the dogs barking, or not that I was looking down there by that stage. Um, but the dogs would have been going, oh, what's that? But it was almost as though it was that quiet.
yeah, at least expect some sort of reaction from them.
You would, you would. Um, but, again, I would have expected a little bit more of a reaction from even my neighbour at the time. I mean, not sort of, I consider myself pretty down to earth, as do most people throughout my life. I haven't seen anything like that since. Wouldn't just pick a night randomly to make up seeing a craft like that, or ever.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
It's sort of like, when I say it was modern by today's standard, it's almost like we're talking square cars at the time. Even our rounded modern four-wheel drives were a long way off, and it was shiny and really good-looking craft. you
Yeah,
know, um, Really, yeah, ultra modern. Looked like it had a grill in the front. Um, and again, like just cruising up the yard as though it had no problem whether anyone saw it. I don't know. I can only think, well, surely it saw me standing there like a shag on a rock next to this tree. I didn't even get as close to the tree. I still wasn't comfortable. I would have been happier to get behind the tree, but by that time it was right there, and I felt like this was the safest spot I could be, because if I move now, I don't know what will happen.
it's one of the situations that you just don't really know what to do or how to even react to it. It's just you sort of got this like natural instinct of fight or flight, and in this case, you
Yeah,
sort of done the old flight sort of thing. Because like,
it was.
how can you even react to it really? Like, what are you expected to
Yeah,
do? To try and fight
well,
something that you can't even really.
exactly. Your head's trying to make sense of what it is, whether it's friend or foe. I mean, clearly my default went to straight to, it's a foe. Is it? It's are green men going to come out? Are people just going to come out and go, or how do they get out of it? Are they humans in uniform, or are they aliens in uniform? But again, the figure that I saw, I couldn't say was, whether it was its head or whether it was its helmet. But it had like a big, the black outline, which was only very quick before it turned the inside light off. So it was a thinking, whatever it was thinking. You know, it was smart enough to turn its lights off, as I was smart enough to turn my laundry light off. But I only turned my laundry light off so I could see, like, everything was darker and I could see what this bright light was a little better. I think was surreptitious the way it turned its light off. If we turn this off, then they won't be able to see inside. Um, and yeah, the for the very fraction of a time that I saw as it was coming up the yard. It's almost like the light wasn't on when I initially, inside wasn't on when I initially saw it. It's like it came on and then went back off. Because it's not even something that, even though it was right there, I didn't notice it straight away. It had to be within a certain range for me to notice it, and obviously it's cruised up a little bit while I was looking that area. I mean, admittedly, I was looking more towards the top of the tree line, and then you glance sort of ahead of you to about to turn around and go, oh, bugger, I missed it. And there it was. Yep, and it was black and coming towards me.
To me, that's pretty frightening.
Well, I can't even say I was frightened. I think it was just shock. I still, you know, I mean, after it, when I talk about it, I'm obviously shaking a little bit now, and my teeth chatter a little bit. I think it's an adrenaline type thing, reliving it all. You know, I've told the story a lot of times to close friends and that. But it's not something, I guess it's so far out of left field that you don't expect. If someone had told me, what would you do if a craft just came cruising up your yard, I'd probably say I'd be hysterical and run away and hide or whatever, but it was almost like I was just a bit overcome, I suppose. Only enough to go, okay, well, at this point in time, I'm safe. So hope it hasn't seen me, hope it's not going to shoot something at me. I'll just sneak out of the way here, probably only about 10 steps to this tree. And by the time I got to the tree, I couldn't, it was there. I'd sort of, and again, I would have been happier to step back and get behind the tree to watch it, or hide, but I just knew that, okay, well, I'm still standing here and I'm alive, and just if I move now, if they haven't seen me, they might.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, to me, like, it just seems a very frightening situation because, like, you know, this is what was it, 89? This happened. You
This
know,
was 1989, yeah.
yeah, and like drones weren't a thing then. Like,
No,
you did say, like,
no,
mention that like military craft do fly over, but being a
yeah.
helicopter, you'd hear that thing from miles away
Oh,
if it's
yeah,
coming in.
yeah, well,
You know, and to me, like, having this
yeah,
massive craft come at you, like, just suddenly, it's like,
yeah,
I don't know. I think I would just be scared shitless, basically. Just, holy crap, what is this coming at me?
yeah.
You know, it defies all
In a
logic.
way, I'm in a way, I'm glad I was on my own. Um, I, I don't know. I just think if there had have been more of us, there'd be more hysteria, and maybe none of us would be safe. Those are the thoughts that run through your head, obviously, for many, many years after. It was, um, okay, it's just me. I mean, I don't know. Can't even explain it as fear. Just absolute, uh, am I really seeing this? And look what I'm seeing. And then it's appeared basically at my back door and just hovering there as though it had absolutely no problem whether it was seen. I don't know. Well, it didn't harm anyone. No one got out of it. So I guess it was just having a sticky beak. I guess if it wanted to, if its occupants wanted to harm, it would have been easy for them, because they only had to come out, and I was standing there and my husband was sitting in the lounge room with a baby. So, why it didn't, I don't know. How would I know?
Yeah, it sort of got me
Um,
curious to think when you mentioned to your husband there, like to come out and see this thing there. It's kind of got me wondering, like, did they hear you say this and sort of get their attention in a sense to sort
um,
of come and see what's going on over towards you?
well, it started to move. If I was to speculate on whether it was seeing me, whether it was, reading my mind, it's almost as though as my thoughts started to realize, it was like I'm standing there, gazing out the window, looking at this light, pondering it takes a while to ponder whether someone's setting up for a party and how did they get a generator down there and that time, how did they get a pole that tall? Um, and then it's almost, if I was to make a bit of a joke about it, that it moved a bit to go hello, because that's what it did. It moved a bit for me to kind of go, hang on a minute. And then when it moved, and then it moved a little bit more, and then I went, oh, what? And then it started to glide, but only quite slowly. That's when I just went, oh, whoa. The light switch was right behind me, as was the door next to it. Flicked that off, ran a couple of steps to the back door as it started to shoot across the sky. And when it shot, and I'm talking a fair amount of sky, but it shot across like nothing that I've ever. Well, you just don't see anything fly like that. As I say, I was familiar with a lot of RAA aircraft and helicopter. We had a lot of. It was the notorious Putty Road, so there was a lot of truck crashes back in the day and very serious crashes. Um, my husband was one of the first on call as part of the local fire brigade type thing to attend accidents, and the next thing you'd usually hear was a helicopter, because by the time police or ambulance got there, it was still a fair way up the road to get to Colo Heights, and usually it was a police helicopter or something like that getting there, and you hear them for miles. As with the RAF planes, you could always hear them coming and going, and doing their exercises, that type of thing, you know. But yeah, again, 1989, it's not as though you know, we had anything very much that was that modern, you know. Um, I, I second guessed. I mean, I wasn't that familiar with military planes that I knew every type of aircraft that we had or anything like that. I just knew the RAF planes and the RAF base at Richmond. But I immediately set about asking people. I considered ringing the RAAF base, but also, I don't know, bit 21 years old and a little bit sort of, how do I even tell them? They'll think I'm a nutcase. Or was it one of their planes or one of their crafts or whatever? I was asking people, do we have anything that doesn't make any noise when it flies? And, some people would say, oh, yeah, the stealth bomber. But everything I researched after that was, no, they still make a massive noise. They don't just make a hum. So, yeah.
No, definitely. Look, I was going to send you a quick message through your messenger there, of what the flight of the Navigator craft looks like. If you just have a quick look for us and see
Yeah.
if that sort of resembles what it might have looked like, just to sort of get a bit of a general idea of just what this craft sort of looked like a bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Not well, yes and no. I would say the shape of it at the front does, but this had more like um, a flat bottom, um, and a windscreen, and like almost a sill for the light. Well, not that I could see the lights at that point, but putting those together as it was coming up the yard, it would have been that shape for sure, front on, but um, uh, without the steep curve, um, in that middle section, if that makes sense.
Yep.
The middle section would have been sort of where the windscreen was, and less pointy, just a straight round glass, like almost, well, I assume it was glass, windscreen, curved round with it, and it had like writing on it. The writing was the craft being dark, the writing was lighter, but still dark, if that makes sense. You could make it out, but it wasn't, you know, whether it was just in a different type of paint, or you could make out that it was dashes and almost like an identification, like triangles and that type of thing. And that was on its right side. I'd love to have been able to stand there and try to make that out, but it was coming towards me.
Have you sort of seen the same writing anywhere else before?
I have recently, funnily enough, the only type of writing I've seen in all that time is when Elon Musk's baby was born, and they had that it had some funny name, and I thought, isn't that funny? That looks like the same type of writing that was on that craft. It was like triangles and dashes and that. I think it was a joke at the time that he'd named his baby whatever it was, and it was the same types of symbols. That's the only way I can describe it.
Well, they have said that Elon Musk is an alien, so it's quite possible that he's probably one of the guys that were in that craft. Maybe, I don't know, just to get a bit of humour behind it.
Yeah, because it wasn't. I can't say it was, the helmet shape. I could say, for the very, very, very short time I saw it, was you could probably describe the shape as like the Egyptian headdress.
Okay.
Type shape, or what's his name of Star Wars?
Darth Vader.
Darth Vader type shape. It came down like a triangle, and then you could make out shoulders. But that was very, very quick. It's like they, accidentally flicked the interior light on, and then went oops, and it went back off.
So it makes you wonder what they're playing at with that sort of thing. Like some people they'll allow themselves to be seen, and have like incredible experiences like yourself. And other times they don't. You might get a snippet here and there, but
yeah,
it sort of makes you wonder, like,
it does.
What are they trying to do? What are they achieving by doing that kind of thing? If they're meant to be doing, if it's intentional or not, that's the thing. That's one of the questions, I suppose. But either way, it's still amazing.
It is amazing, and obviously I feel very privileged to have seen something like that. I will never ever. I have never not believed someone. When people know what they see. At the time, I didn't really tell a lot of people because that I was busy trying to digest it myself, and life moves very quickly as a 21-year-old with a new baby, and life just does seem to get in the way of trying to digest it, and especially something like that. I'll take that to my grave and probably never know what it was, or why it was there, or whether it was just whether they've got a sense of humour and had a bit of a joke, whether it was something that is our military and they just thought they'd have a bit of a practical joke. I don't know that. I can't. My guess is as good as anyone else's. Whether it's something of ours, or whether we had technology then like that they keep secret. that type of thing, I honestly don't know. But I do, what I do think is that, again, you know, it's out on the sky there's not a lot of lights in that area, especially as accessible as my property was, that they could come and have a little look, because but, you know, years later, I moved to Queensland, and I was telling, you know, a friend of mine, and she said, oh, I've got some friends that are very interested in UFOs, and she took me around to have a coffee with this lady who she said, and I told her the story, and she said, isn't that interesting? Where is this place again? And I said, well, you know, it's the Colo, and she said, is that anywhere near Gosford? And I said, well, Gosford, I believe, is on the other side of the national park, which is still some thousands of hectares away, but she gave me a little book. I wish I had kept it actually, but I gave it back, and it was called the Gosford Files. And the amount of sightings, there used to be a lot of YouTube videos that I used to watch. They all seem to have gone now. But the book was very interesting, describing crafts like I'd seen, and on the lake or the ocean there at Gosford, sucking up water, that type of thing. And, you know, the Colo always did have a bit of a strange feel. You know, I'm not that type of person. I wouldn't consider myself, you know, terribly spiritual or anything like that. But even if I was to go down there, even driving through that road, whether it wasn't because of the experience that I had, because I had that feel about the place. It's very ancient, and it's also the home. The other side of the Putty Road is the Wallamai National Park, where they found the ancient Wallamai pine. And, you know, things could be in there that you just are completely still undiscovered because it's so rugged, and, you know, made me think, does this thing live in there? I mean, it will always fascinate me. You know, I haven't put it out there very much. I haven't told too many people. Some people just blown away by it, but don't really have a lot of comment, whether that's because they're a bit stunned, or whether there's a certain amount of disbelief or not wanting to believe. Or, you know, I did have one comment at the time, oh, well, you know, you had a new baby, and, you know, you were probably really tired. I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter to me whether anyone believes me or not. It's not like I've really put it out there over the years. It's not like, I mean, I've managed to live through it for another 33 years. And I do have a look. I don't closely. I did put something about my story online once on a UFO thing. It may be floating around there online somewhere. But outside of that, you know, it hasn't ruled my life. I don't, you know, I've had to keep everything in perspective, and again, still try to think, well, it could have been something of ours. But yeah, certainly do believe when people have these experiences, you know, you can tell, you know, you just know they're not making it up. You know, they absolutely know what they see, whether or not that's just a flash across the sky, whether, you know, there are things that obviously can be explained, and probably mine could be explained too. But, you know, without that information, I don't know. But when people tell their stories, I mean, I'm the first to listen, because, yeah, you know, I have absolutely no reason to make something like that up.
No, that's dead set true. You know, because like a lot of people don't understand what happens around this world, and something like this does come across as, like, you know, crazy, or
Yeah,
someone's on
yeah,
drugs or something. You know, and that's where
yeah,
sort of like the ridicule comes from it all.
yeah,
But you know, not everyone's lying. Not everyone's on drugs. No, not everyone's crazy, and people are seeing these things. It doesn't matter what
Yeah.
what or who you are. Like these things, if you're lucky enough, you're going to see these things. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the really strange part about this whole thing.
Yeah.
And people are
Yeah.
still afraid to sort of come forward and talk about this kind of thing. And like
Yeah.
yourself here, like you can hear you as you're speaking, you're like, explaining your experience. Like
Yeah.
your nerves are coming out. You
Yeah. Yeah.
like, unless you're like a really good actor, but then like
It's like it was yesterday. I've got a friend that, we discuss it. Oh, we discussed it for years, and I've known these friends for, and I said, it's interesting. And he said, I just want to say, every time you tell that story, he said, I've known you for over 20 years. It's exactly the same. I said, well, it can't be anything else.
yeah,
It just can't. It can't be anything else because that's what it was.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like it is unfortunate that like, it's still getting ridiculed and and stuff. Like, but I guess that's the thing. Like people just don't understand what is going on around here, and
Yeah.
I guess that's just
Oh,
the biggest
I
thing that
don't.
people need to understand it.
Certainly haven't been necessarily ridiculed from probably one person, and over a few drinks, back in the day as a bit of a joke. But I don't even. I'm not even offended by that because it's like, yeah, okay, this. I've just put it there. You do it with it, whatever you want. I'm at the point now where, you know, I could either put it out there or not put it out there. I've got nothing to gain or nothing to lose by putting it out there. But if it may be a tiny piece of some other puzzle that someone can piece something together, then it's probably worth putting it out there. Other than that, it was what it was.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing too from it. Like people don't understand or realize either. Like there is nothing to gain from making this kind of thing up. Like you're not getting that big an attention for you're gonna
No.
get people buying your
Uh,
story or stuff like that. Like it's
yeah. Yeah.
there's nothing to gain from it. It's just an experience that you've had, and it's incredible.
Yeah. And, you know, um, I, different friends I told that to have said, oh yes, when we were driving, we saw this light and it followed us and that type of thing, which is just as an incredible experience for them. There's still that, and the thing is, the experiences are not uncommon, and that's the thing. It's like it's not as though I'm rare, you know. It's an amazing experience. It's incredible. But over the years, it's probably not as incredible to me as it was at the time because I've digested it. But there are some incredible stories out there, and it's like, how do people still go, oh yeah, but it's like, well, they're more common, I believe, now than not common. Everybody seems to have seen something. They don't. It's not necessarily making a big deal about it, but yeah.
Yeah, like especially for back in those days, like the technology was completely different to what we have now.
Yeah.
Like depending on what people are seeing these days, a lot of things can be explained or
Yeah.
misidentified and such.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when someone sees something that's in like it's like right there in front of them, like yours, for
Yeah.
example, or they see it do something amazing in the sky that defies all our modern logic when it comes to
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
That's the genuine stuff right there. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
and I guess
I mean,
that's
we're talking, the cars, it's gone very quickly, but, people of my era would know 1989. Okay, we were sort of, there was no, I think the mobile phone was a box that you hooked into your car that was massive. That, we all can find out what 89 was like. Our cars weren't that modern. Uh, yeah, it was, and this is, again, this was ultra modern by today's standards. The sighting that my grandmother saw, formation of separate craft, or we didn't have planes like that then that could fly like that, and no sound and the lights and things like that. Again, I'm not pretending I saw that. I didn't see it. But you know, we're talking almost over, well, 40, 46 years ago, roughly, that those planes were flying over Yamba when, yeah, we just didn't have anything like that at all then.
Yeah,
We had
I just want to
yeah,
touch on that. Did your grandparents mention if like it did any strange maneuvers or anything, like that, or was it just sort of like just traveling in
no,
one direction?
it's just cruised across the sky apparently in a very large formation. And I suppose I would have been about, trying to think how old I was, probably about 5 or 6. Um, and yeah, my auntie, you know, again, you waited months for the mail from overseas, and this clipping came back months later. I mean, obviously, I discussed it with my grandmother over the years. She still had that newspaper clipping somewhere, and of lights taken somewhere over America of exactly the same thing. She felt validated. You know, again, you know, she was a little bit upset about, you know, my granddad coming home and his workmates having said that, and you know, yeah, sort of you could always tell that it hurt her. You know, she didn't want to be thought of as, you know, she didn't even drink, so
Oh,
she didn't want to be mocked like that. But you know, again, you know, where if people said that with my story, and it doesn't matter to me. You know, I'm old enough to that it's water off a duck's back to me, whether someone believes it, whether they don't. It doesn't. It honestly doesn't matter. It doesn't change my life whatsoever. It's just there, and that's what I saw. Simple.
yeah, no, look, that's totally understandable, and like, hopefully this sort of encourages people to have the sort of same mindset as well. Like, who cares what everyone else sort of thinks? Like, people are going to
Yeah,
judge you regardless, but you know,
yeah,
this is your experience. This is something you should be proud of that you were able to
yeah,
actually sort of witness something that's so amazing.
yeah.
There's people out there that would give anything to go and see something like that, you know?
All right. Well, you know, perhaps the Colo is the place to be.
And quite
Um,
possibly.
yeah, yeah. Because this was very at home. That's all I can really sort of say. It was as though I was in its area, for if that makes sense. It was like it wasn't tentative about what it was doing other than switching its lights. It wasn't shy. If it was, it didn't hide off in the distance and watch me from afar. It just decided, okay, it was bold enough just to cruise up and look through the back door, and whether it was they were sitting in there looking at me standing there like making like a tree, I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard the theories like these things or beings or whatever, they're supposed to be like sort of multi-dimensional. And
yeah.
it sort of makes you wonder like, did you somehow manage to pass through to like their
Well,
dimension in a sense where you were able to observe it and they've sort of sensed and clicked on that and gone, hang on, there's something over
yeah,
here that's intruding into our
it
dimensional
makes you
space.
wonder. Yeah, it does make you wonder. With you know, I've discussed it with people over the years, and you know, the dimensional thing, and you know, whether that, you know, there's a dimension, you know, an in between type thing, you know, mainly trying to get my head around how did it just disappear. um was it a projection? uh those sorts of things, you know, you pretty much, when you see something like that, you try to study every single thing you can, which wasn't easy back then. You couldn't really, I mean, even that little book given to me, that Gosford Files, you know, it was all just description and drawings. Still not the same as the one I saw, but stories very similar to mine, not maybe not as close, but people looking out of their windows at Gosford and over the lake, and these craft, just these big lights and what appeared to be sucking up water out of the lake and that sort of thing. And around Gosford, I mean, whoever wrote a book about it. It's called the Gosford Files. Whether or not it's still printed, I don't know. But there's plenty of sightings because there was a little paperback book written about them, unbeknown to me at the time. But, it wasn't a case that you could just jump on the computer and, Google anything. You sort of had to just make your way through it.
Yeah, so for those that are interested, the Gossip Files is for UFOs over the Central Coast in New South Wales by Brian Dixon and Moira McGee. So, but yeah, I haven't read it myself there, but I've heard a lot of stories in regards to that. And I think I was trying to get in contact with Moira McGee there at one stage there to try and get her on the podcast here and talk about it, but unfortunately, no luck there yet.
Oh, right. No, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah, because it does seem like there's a lot happening in that area, so it makes you wonder, like, what's the interest in that area? And
Yeah.
like, this is sort of like a question I was going to ask you too. Like, when you observe this craft, like, did it sort of like seem like it was trying to look for something, maybe, or?
Um, no, I think it came round in the direction because it saw my figure in the window. And if it was looking for anything, it was just curious. I would have, I mean, if it meant harm, it would have done harm. If I'd have stepped out from the tree, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I can't say with something like that appeared to be almost waving at me, type thing when it was this massive light. It's this massive light in a huge dark sky with and moving as though in the one spot, what I'm looking at it for quite while I'm sort of spinning things in the twin tub and glancing back down and looking up and kind of pondering in my head what that could be. And when it started to move, it only moved a little bit, almost as though it was trying to make me wake up and see it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if someone was having a bit of a joke with you and they were standing right in front of you and you're not noticing and they move a bit and like, hello.
Yeah, it's trying to get your attention.
And as though, if I was to hazard anything, that would be the closest that I would get. And then when it's almost like it realised when I realised, okay, she's seen us, and I mean, if they could see that far or they had binoculars, I would have been like, wow, okay. And then the light's gone off in the laundry. And the only illumination, because my background of light wasn't on, it didn't need to be, because prior to that, the laundry light lit up the back veranda. The only light then was the house. And I don't think by then it would have seen me run down the back stairs. It couldn't have, because by then it was behind the trees. As I was running down the back stairs onto the yard, it was curving around and disappearing behind the Crown land, if that makes sense. And then I'm like, oh, it's gone behind all the hill there and the trees, and sort of glanced down, sort of glanced straight ahead just to be gobsmacked, like someone hit me in the chest, with this craft just cruising up. So yeah, I mean, the flight thing had to overcome the shock of it, looking in the distance, trying to find this white light, to suddenly it's right there, it's come around from, I'm looking more to the right, and then it's turned its lights off and cruising up the yard, this black craft, or appeared to be black, against a blacker, lighter sky behind it. And then the oops moment where the light came on, and I'm like, oh wow, okay. And then the light quickly went off. So the occupants were thinking they're thinking people or beings, they knew to turn their inside light off. So they obviously didn't want me to see them too much. But they had no real problem with having the green lights on, flicking around the craft while it was hovering there, at the risk of my husband seeing it if they hadn't seen me. And he's sitting with his back to it, and it's peering, these, whatever they are, peering in the back door. So, if that's not bold, it's like they didn't care. They didn't care whether they were seen. Obviously, they're not really afraid of us, or, and if it was something from the RAAF, I can't say, then they weren't really worried either. And if it was something of ours, it was almost as though they were having a practical joke. But again, I don't know the way it disappeared, and whether it stepped out or whether I stepped in of another dimension. I don't know. But I don't know how something like that disappears into the tops of trees appearing to go down in the ground. Or did it appear as though it was going down and then switched the lights off and was gone and appeared to vanish before my eyes, but actually go down, like not go down into the trees, just zip across the sky like it had come there?
Yeah, it wasn't like not a hillside or anything like that where it could have gone over the
No, it was all
hill.
absolutely level. The trees on the Crown land next door to my place, so the house and the shed, and then about a quarter of an acre on that tree. My yard was all clear, like mowed type thing, but on that tree line, on that fence line, the trees were massive gum trees, thick, massive gum trees, no hills right around that area. The only interruption was tall trees, even down the back where I said it disappeared behind the tree line. It would have appeared a bit like a bit of a hill, but it was mostly just a tree, like a thick tree, tall and short and thick.
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch back on the dimensional sort of aspect of things. Like, did you ever take note of the time frame of like when this sort of happened? Like, if like potential missing time, if like you were gone for a period of time?
Yeah, no, I don't believe I was, because my husband was still in the same place with the baby when it left. He wasn't asleep yet. The time, I think, was completely normal. I basically ran through, and I was more at that point interested and excited and shocked, I suppose, to see my neighbour and see if she'd seen it and whatever, than what I was explaining to my husband what I just saw that was at his back door without him even noticing.
Yeah. No, either way, it's all amazing.
Yeah. It's always made me think, I mean, I look around where I am now, and you have some skies, and you can almost, I can still pick the type of evening that I, with the light behind it, that I can almost see a craft coming up the yard, because it's so burned into my eyes and brain that I know the type of dark it was, and how this craft stood out by itself being darker, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's like it's casting a shadow on the sky.
Yeah, and the detail of it still, even though it was black, you could still make out the dark and light spots and things like that on the front of it. I didn't get to see the side of it as it. I would have loved to have walked backwards, to be able to observe it as it, the side of it as it approached, because I would have got probably a better look at it coming up than what I did, even though it was right there and I could have 10 steps away and hit it with the rock. But the trees behind it by then and the angle I was looking at it made it darker, because the trees were so tall behind it that it didn't stand out as much against, because there wasn't any sky behind it, if that sort of paints the picture.
Yeah, no, it does. So, but have you like experienced anything else after that? Like, did it sort of trigger like moments in your life where things were starting to happen in that kind of regard?
As in,
Like sightings or maybe possible like abductions or anything like that, maybe?
um, things that I've had, that I would say, I can't say whether they were dreams or not, but you know, I did have I wouldn't say I'm the sort of person, even with that experience, to dream about aliens. Um, because I still have in my head that I don't even know whether it was. I don't know. All I can say is what I saw, but I have had a dream where um uh yeah I was basically looking at and through alien's eyes, if that makes sense, um, and inside of a dashboard, while and being sort of telepath. This is really awkward for me to describe this, because I've not told anybody. Um,
That's all right. If you feel
Probably,
comfortable sharing it, that's or don't feel
yeah,
comfortable, that's entirely up to you. It's no pressure.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm going to say it was probably a dream, but I do remember feeling like I can't even say whether it was a week ago or whether it was years ago, this dream, because I can't put a timeline on it. It's just like a memory that I have that I looked into, like I couldn't work out whether it was, and it was a being, and it was shiny eyes, but I was trying to work out whether or not it was someone inside a helmet or inside of these eyes, or whether or not that it didn't speak, but it had a human voice and said, it's okay, we're not going to hurt you. And that was, it was like um, like whether or not, I mean, I've had a back operation, whether or not it was something that related to an operation I've had, and I've imagined it to be a who knows. But um, very big eyes, and looking over, I would say it was in a craft, circular, and looking over and seeing another lady in pink undies on another, facing away from me. Um, and when I turned around, like turning around, looking at her, and then looking up and seeing this almost, I suppose, uh, alien face sitting um, at my right shoulder, looking up, and this, well, man's voice saying, it's okay, we're not going to hurt you. And then um, sort of accepting that, and then looking around and seeing reflections um, off the windscreen of being, or whether it was glass or what. I don't know whether or not that's something my mind has conjured up, out of imaginings because of what I saw or what I've read. I can't say, because I can't, or a dream. Um, but yeah, that's just another weird thing, I suppose. But that one I can't put any sort of sense to, as far as whether it was real or whether it was not. The craft was real. Um, the other thing, could have been a dream. I don't know.
Have you thought of maybe like regressional therapy?
I have, yes, but it's one of those things that sort of, where do you go? How do you do it? Not really, a priority, but yeah, it has interested me, but um, at the same time, I'm not obsessed with it. I live a pretty simple life, sort of thing. Again, I can't explain the craft. The other thing I could say, well, maybe I just dreamt that one night relative to, what I'd seen. I did have another very scary dream when I'd moved to Queensland and my second son was born. I had a dream that I got up and there was all lights in the sky and it was like a war going on with these lights. And that was scary. That was more scary in this dream than what it was with the craft coming up the arch. Because I think the craft was more um, shock and not really knowing, not really necessarily being afraid or knowing to be afraid straight off. Um, but the dream was just adrenaline and fear and wanting to protect my kids. And it was like I was actually standing on my back veranda looking out and watching all this go on. So whether that's just something I conjured up in my, subconscious because of what I'd seen with the craft, I don't know either. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I would love to be able to, I've always sort of thought if I was hypnotized, could I make out more detail, and, I've laid there and closed my eyes a lot and gone through every single thing and, it's almost tried to self-hypnotize to see if I can work out those letters and dashes and identification on the craft and perhaps more detail that my brain hasn't really picked up because of maybe a bit too shocked and overwhelmed. But yeah, haven't done that.
Yeah, we got Mary Rodwell. She's in central Queensland, I think. I'm not sure she's still located there, but she's pretty well known regarding to regressional therapy and that. There might be
Hmm.
some others around southeast Queensland and such. I'm not really sure,
Yeah,
but it's certainly something you could always consider. It also like depends on how much or how far you want to go and try and get these answers. That's the other thing. But you're
yeah,
saying you're not really too
yeah,
concerned about it, but
yeah,
I suppose the
yeah.
options are still always there.
They are, and it, you'd think that I'd sort of, I don't know, after an experience, you'd think about it every day, but it's been over 33 years, and I've had a busy life in amongst it, and it pops up in my head from time to time, and then I have a little bit of a rush on looking up UFO things online or in books, and then I have to move on with life again. You know how it works.
Yeah, yep. No, I definitely know. I understand it completely. Like on the sidelines, I sort of like keep an eye out what's going around the world, what's happening in life with in regards to the UFO topic and that. But in
Hmm.
the meantime, I'm more focused on my own life.
Yeah, you have to. You can't. Well, I can't. I can only speak for myself, but I've got things to do and things to manage, and I can't be off daydreaming about what could or couldn't be or maybe. You've got to be in tune with what's going on day to day. So um, maybe if someone told me that story, I may sort of be like, well, I think I'd be obsessed with it for every single day, but for me it didn't work like that. um, for me it was still trying to pick apart and understand and maybe work out whether it was something of ours. um, I don't think it was, but there's also that, you know, sort of part of me that needs to be balanced um, and and um, maybe just, sort of pick apart every possibility. You'd sort of be silly not to, really. You can't just sort of run with the first thing you think something might be, despite the fact that it was quite out there and quite amazing.
Yeah, I'm surprised you actually try to pick it apart to try and put logic to it. Like for me, like I know as obvious as you're explaining it, something that's hovering there defies the logic of any conventional aircrafts that we have at the time. And the fact that you're still trying to pick apart what every possibility is, that's the one of the greatest things I've ever heard. Really, when it comes to that thing, like you're still trying to put the logic behind it.
Yeah. Well, again, at 21, I didn't know what we had that was secret. You heard about, different secret aircraft that they test and that sort of thing. You think, well, they got something way, way ahead of our time that we don't know about, and they keep secret from us. And I get a little bit of a flash personal viewing of it. I've read things about secret aircraft that, but even at the time, I guess having said that at 21, even though, maybe people older than me at the time may have sort of reacted a little bit more shocked and absolutely knowing than I did, but at 21, you certainly know you don't know a lot. As wise as I think I was at 21, and I'd had a baby and I was keeping house and was, always pretty much a country girl, had seen a lot, but always was brought up to be level-headed. I consider myself level-headed, and my grandparents would be ashamed of me if I wasn't. But yeah, I still try to study, and yes, I still was. I think that's probably my logic was probably what got me through the experience, because I have had people go, I would have just fainted. I would have just done this or that. But maybe if I heard the story and was only speculating on what I may have felt, I may say the same thing. But I can only say how it was at the time and what I was looking at. I was determined, because at that point, I knew I was the only one seeing it. But again, hoping my husband didn't just sort of go, oh, where is she? And bring the baby to the back door. And, there certainly still was fear there. Lots of different thoughts, is this the day I die? Do they just get out and, and kill me or take me? Who knows? And a lot of thoughts, but at that space and that time, I thought, well, I've got to burn this into my brain. I've got to make out every single detail and stand here level-headed to do it. Couldn't blink. No, I couldn't let myself blink. So I just had to keep my head. And I suppose having, again, I was brought up, I suppose, around animals and, to be careful how you react with certain situations. And, so for probably a younger age, I was, knew how to react, not to frighten, horses, had some horse experience and things like that. That's all I can really put to it, is that, I was probably fairly mature in as far as being level-headed at that age. Then, had seen lots of horrible things with, accidents and all sorts of things that does give you a little bit more. I wasn't as easily shocked as a lot of 21-year-olds might have been, if that makes any sense at all. And you can't sort of, you see this thing coming towards you, and it's just like I don't think even in those days I even verbalized at 21, oh my God, or anything like that. I think that developed and swearing at different things I saw developed later. It was more just, okay, more matter of fact about what I was seeing and not even really verbalizing a reaction. It was just, I just know that I've got to get out of the way or it'll be cruising. If it hasn't seen me, it's going to, and it's going to be above my head.
It sort of makes you wonder how the scenario would have played out had your husband walked out or had you stayed in the same spot and observing all this. Like, there's so many different scenarios that
There
could have
is,
played
yeah.
out.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I've played out every single one, as you can imagine.
Yeah, no, look, it's certainly incredible and one of the rarest things you can never sort of hope to expect when it comes to this kind of sighting or encounter, A lot of people just see a light in the sky. Some people might get a bit of a distinct shape of a craft that's miles away, but literally being meters away from it, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, look, I hope, like you coming on and talking about your experience there will encourage a lot more people to come forward and not care about the whole aspect of what people think of their experiences or, how they're going to judge them. The experience is there. And, like, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and to talk about your experience.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It is easier to explain verbally than to try to write it down, if that makes any sense. It's, trying to put perspective, even, trying to write it down where everything was and how, you've got to put thoughts and feelings and all sorts of things into that. And, it is much easier to talk to somebody. So, and I've shared the story with friends over the years, and it's made me more relaxed about the way I talk about it. If it helps somebody else, we're obviously among like-minded people. It's nice to be able to, have something that, you can talk about. And, for me, I may not have been ready years ago to put it out there like this, but, what have I got to lose now? If it doesn't really matter, and it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. They can either believe it, they can mock it. It doesn't change it. So it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And look, people like yourself coming out and talking about your experiences there, it's on the path there to try and destroy the ridicule and the whole crap that's been going off with the UFO topic. People just shut it down every time and start calling people loony bins, because of it. But the reality is these things are happening around the world. People are experiencing these things, and yourself coming on and talking about it openly is one of the biggest first steps anyone should really make when it comes to having their encounters. Talk about it, reach out, and if it's it can be like a very emotional sort of roller coaster in its own way, but a lot of people feel a lot better after talking about it, and especially with this like-minded people. It has a better outcome, I feel. But look, again, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was absolutely fantastic having you on here, and the experience there is absolutely amazing, and quite scary in its own way as well. It's absolutely incredible. So look, thank you very much again for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
And that will do it, folks, for this episode of Encounters Down Under. I hope you enjoyed the show, and remember, you can also get involved in the show by joining the Facebook page and getting in on the live streams. Also, please be sure to share with your friends and family to help us grow and potentially find our next guest on the show. If you or you know someone who has had an encounter, please get in touch with me through our Facebook page via Messenger or email at australianufosighting@outlook.com.au. I look forward to seeing you on the next Encounter Down Under. Hooroo!